So on Mem Chesem and Aleph Rabba Rabbi Zera. Rabba Rabbi Zera Iklo Lebei Reish Galusa. Rabba and Rabbi Zera, they were at Reish Galusa's house. He's the head of the Bavel community. Chazua Lohu Avda. They saw a servant, the Anach Kuza Demaya Apuma de Kumkuma. And this was on Shabbos. They saw him put a jug of cold water on top of a kettle of hot water. Nazhei Rabba. So Rabba yelled at this servant, even though it wasn't his. It was presumably the Reish Galusa's servant. Omerle Reb Zera, Ma'ishna mimechem al gabi mechem. Why are you yelling at him? Why is this different than putting a kettle on top of another kettle? A hot water kettle on top of another one of hot water. So Rabba says back, Hasam ukumi kamoikim. There you're just keeping the water hot. So when you have the pot on top is full of hot water and you're putting that on the top of another pot of hot water, you're just preserving the heat. That's okay on Shabbos. Hacha, here where the upper jug is cold, a ludi kamoilid. There, literally, it's like you're giving birth. It's new. You're creating heat for the water above. Exactly. Hadr Chazye, he saw him do something else. The paras distoider apume de kuva. He spread a sudar. Dastoider is a sudar, like a handkerchief on top of the kuba, on top of the jug of water. Vanach natla ilave. And then on top of the sudar, on top of the handkerchief, he put another cup. Nazhei Rabba. Again, Rabba yells at him. Omerle Reb Zera amai. Why are you yelling at the guy? Omerle hashta chazis. You'll see why I have to yell at him, because what's going to eventually happen. L'seif chazye de kama atzarle. Later on, they saw that this handkerchief, the servant was squeezing it to get the water out of it, because it was there on top of an open thing of water, so it got wet and he was squeezing it.
It was being steamed, I guess.
Okay. But either way, it was in a position where it was going to definitely get wet, so the reason that he was yelling at him was because you're letting a towel of some sort get wet on Shabbos, and that you're not supposed to do, because it's going to lead you to end up squeezing it. Omerle Maishna mi prunka. Reb Zera said, why is this different than a prunka, which is a towel or something that you always get wet? So a modern example would be like drying dishes on Shabbos. Why is it okay to dry dishes then on Shabbos if you're going to get the towel wet? Omerle hasam loy kapit ilave. There you're not makbid on that kind of towel. You know, if it's a shmata, then you're happy for it to get wet, if that's its purpose. Hacha, but over here, where the sudar is not meant for that purpose, kapid oleve, you're makbid, and you don't want it to be wet, and that's why you're going to end up squeezing it. So it really depends on what the purpose of that towel is for. So the Mishnah says, loy v'tevin. You're not allowed to use tevin, straw, for hatmana, because it makes the stuff get hotter. So he asked, Moichin shetaman bahen mahu letalton b'Shabbos. If you use moichin is like cotton. So if you use cotton one time for hatmana, to insulate a hot pot on Shabbos, what's the halacha when it comes to muksa? So what are the two sides of the question? On the one hand, maybe it's usher to move these moichin, these cotton material, because this cotton material is meant to turn into clothing. It's not processed yet. It's just plain cotton. You're going to turn it into, I don't know, socks or something, right? So right now, that's a reason to say that it's muksa, because it's unfinished raw material. Or on the other hand, you could say, since you used it for hatmana, so now it's already like a towel or something that you're using for hatmana, for insulating the pot, and it's like any other kli that you have in your house. Omerle, so Abaye says it's muksa. Just because it happens to be this Shabbos you didn't have the straw, which is the more common material that you would use for hatmana. So now you're going to set aside the cotton, which is more expensive. So you only use the cotton because of exigent circumstances, but you didn't actually set it aside permanently. If you did, then there's no shaila. Then if you happen to set aside the moichin for hatmana, then that's a different story. But Abaye is saying the sort of the standard is that a person wouldn't set aside the moichin because it's not efficient to use moichin for this. You have other materials which are cheaper.
Didn't you say at some point that you're not allowed to do this, to wrap your thing with insulation?
Certain kind.
Well, so let's say he did it before Shabbos, right? What's the deal specifically with moichin? Well, moichin, it's only a problem if it's moist. The Mishnah says, but you could do hatmana with moichin when they're dry. So let's say you did it when they're dry, and now there's a shaila of muksa, so we're saying it's muksa, according to Abaye, because you would ordinarily use straw. Leiman misayele, so we want to bring a proof, a support for Abaye, who says that it's still muksa. Taimnim begizei tzemer, it says in the Brisa, you can do hatmana with gizei tzemer, so that's wool, v'tzipei tzemer, u'b'lashaynei shel argaman u'v'moichin, v'ein metal t'neisan. So there's a whole list of materials, including moichin, the cotton, and it says you can't, it's muksa, you're not allowed to move it. So it sounds like even though you're using the cotton for hatmana, it still remains muksa, like Abaye was saying. So the Gemara says, no, that's not a proof. Mishum hala iria. Hachikamer, you can explain the Brisa differently. V'im leitaman behen, it means to say, and if you didn't use it for hatmana, if you use it for hatmana, then it's not muksa anymore, it becomes a kli, it becomes a vessel for hatmana, and therefore it's not muksa. The end of the Brisa is talking about where if you didn't use it for hatmana, then ein metal t'neisan, then they're muksa. So if that's the shot in the Brisa, what's the chiddush in the Brisa? Why would the Brisa be telling me that if you didn't use the moichin, the cotton, for the raw cotton for hatmana, that it's muksa? It's obvious that it's muksa because it's just unprocessed cotton. No, because you may have said that you could still use it to sit on it for a cushion or whatever. Kamash Malon, that no, that's not what we're going to assume, and it's going to be muksa unless you use it for hatmana. So there's no proof for Abaye. But Abaye did say, and probably the halacha is, that the raw cotton, even if you use it for hatmana, is muksa. Rav Chisda shar la dure udra lebeisajja b'shabsa. Rav Chisda allowed to return the cotton that came out of the pillow on Shabbos. So the stuffing in the pillow, he said you could put it back in if it comes out. Feathers, whatever. Moichin is like any kind of soft material. I think it's a sort of a broad term. Eisvei Rav Chanan bar Chisel Rav Chisda. So he asks him from a Brisa. It says in the Brisa, Matirin beis atzavar b'Shabbos. If you have the opening for the neck in some type of clothing, like a undershirt or whatever, so if it was tied with a knot, you can untie the knot. This was tied up sometimes when you would bring it to the kaives. You would bring it to the cleaners, so they would temporarily make some type of they would close up these openings, maybe to help them clean it in the process. So you can open that, so you can stick your head through it. But you can't open it for the first time. So when they sew the actual shirt, you can't actually make the opening for the head, because then you're completing the shirt, and that's nakaba patish. Anytime you complete any kli on Shabbos, you're essentially making it into a kli. So that's aser on Shabbos. And you're not allowed to put the feathers, the cotton or whatever inside the pillows on Yom Tov. And goes out saying on Shabbos you're not allowed to do that. So how can Rav Chisda say that you are allowed to put the stuff back into the pillow? Like kashya habachadati habatike. The difference is if it's new or it's old. So when it's old, it was already a pillow and it just some came out, you could put it back in. But when you're making a pillow for the first time, you're in the pillow factory and you're putting the stuffing into the pillow, that's aser. The Brisa says you're not allowed to stuff the pillow. But if it came out of a pillow, a pre-existing pillow, then you're allowed to put it back in. So these are rules in Makabeh Patish. Makabeh Patish is in the first time creating the pillow, as opposed to a pillow, but stuffing came out. Amar of Yehuda Amarav. He says, "Hapaiseach beiset savar b'Shabbos chayiv chatas." If you open up the space for the head in the shirt, then you're chayiv chatas. That's Makabeh Patish because you're completing the shirt. Maskifla Rav Kahana. Rav Kahana asked, "Ma bein zul megufas chavis?" Why is this different than taking off the top of a barrel? So the halacha is that the top of a barrel was sort of sealed to the rest of the barrel, and then it's mutter on Shabbos to take a knife and remove the top, kind of like opening up a bottle, right?
Yeah, isn't food different anyways than a shirt? You have to do malachas, certain malachas.
No, so it doesn't sound like that's the distinction.
Because you can open up a bag of potato chips on Shabbos for food, but if you want to rip a piece of paper, you couldn't do that. You can open up a bag of potato chips on Shabbos, but you wanted to rip open a bag for laundry on Shabbos, you couldn't.
Well, it's all going to go back. The bag of potato chips is mutter like the megufas chavis, like the top of the chavis.
Right, that's what I'm saying. It's not the same case as opening up a shirt top.
No, it doesn't sound like there's a distinction though in terms of food or not. But anyways, the distinctions that they make is they say Homole Rava Zeh Chibur v'Zeh Eine Chibur. So the beged, the clothing, that's one thing. You have one item, chibur, and you're creating an opening on the top. You're creating an opening on the top for the space for your head. When it comes to the chavis, the barrel, zein chibur, you had two pieces. You had the cover of the barrel. You had the barrel. They happened to seal the top onto the rest of the barrel, but that's not considered like it's one piece because it was put on it for the purpose of being removed when you want to have the wine. Whereas the shirt, even though there is a purpose eventually to open it up, but it was all just one thing. They were just sewing a plain straight material, and you're creating a hole in it, and therefore you're not allowed to open that on Shabbos. This was actually my question getting into yeshiva, because the halacha of removing the top of a chavis is also in Makkos, which I was learning in grade 8 in Eitz Chaim. So Rabbi Englander asked me, he says, where can you show me from the Gemara that you're allowed to open up cans of soda on Shabbos from the Gemara? So, what? Yeah, I got it.
Which kid doesn't know that?
That's his history.
Rami le Rabbi Yirmiyah le Reb Zera. Rabbi Yirmiyah had a question for Reb Zera. So these are two. Again, we're going to get into chibur now, just like we started off with the chavis and the chavis and opening up the thing for the shirt. So Tanan shalal shal kaifsim. So clothing that the washers attach together. So you bring your socks to the cleaners, and they string them together. V'shal shelish shal maftachos, or a chain of keys, a key chain. A beged shehu tafur b'kilayim, or a beged that's sewed up with another beged with the opposite min. So if let's say you have two, what? Yeah, so the string is made out of linen, and then the clothing are made out of wool. So in all of these cases, chibur l'tumah, they're considered attached with regards to tumah. So if one of the begadim or one of the keys becomes tameh, then the other begadim or the other keys automatically become tameh too. So they're all considered one for tumah.
When did he bring this to the king? When did he
Oh, so you brought it to the cleaner on Sunday. He tied it together, and then on Monday, one sock became tamei. The other sock, which is tied to the first sock, on Monday is going to get tamei. Okay, ad she'yaschil lahatir, until you begin to separate them, then you remove the chibur. Alma, so what do we see from here? Shalei b'shas malacha nami chibur. That even not during the malacha, which requires them to be together. So in the case of, let's say, the washers, for the at the cleaners, he needs it to be together for his process, but not when you bring it home. What? So we see that even after you bring it home and you have no purpose in the attachment, we still consider it to be attached in all one thing. Uraminhu, but we have another Mishnah which seems to indicate the opposite. The other Mishnah says, Makel sha'asa yad lekardim. If you have a piece of wood, a stick, which is the yad, that's the handle part of the axe. So that's the wood that goes with the metal. So it's chibur l'tumah b'shas malacha. The wood is considered attached to the metal only while you need them to be attached. So while you're actually chopping down the tree or whatever. So what do we see from this Mishnah? B'shas malacha in, shalai b'shas malacha loi. We only consider it to be one while you need it to be that way. So that's not like the first Mishnah we saw, which said that even after you take it home from the cleaners, the socks are still considered connected. Omer lei, Reb Zera says, Hasam shalai b'shas malacha adam asui l'zarka l'bein ha'etim. So when it comes to the wood, which is cheap, and the only thing that's of value is the metal, so when you're not chopping down the trees, I guess it was common practice to remove the wood and just to keep it with the rest of your wood in the woodshed, which you can use for anything, for burning, whatever, because that's easily replaced. But here, where your socks are attached, you like it to be attached even if you're not the cleaners. You bring it home, you like them to be attached. Because if they get dirty, it'll be more convenient to clean them together and save, I guess, the cleaners the trouble of reattaching them. So there's some convenience in keeping them together, and therefore they remain considered a chibur. They're all considered one for tumah. So it all has to do with intentions, or assumed intentions. Besura masal hashmaisa. In Surah, they learned this sugya mishmei Rav Chisda, uve pumedisa masal mishmei Rav Kana. Pumedisa, the following sugya they learned from Rav Kahana. V'amri la mishmei Rabba, some say Rabba. So there's a confusion who it's from. Mantana ha milsa da amar Rabbanan kol mechuber loy harehu kamayo. Who is the Tana who says that anything that's attached to something is like the same thing for Tumah? Right? So similar to what we were talking about before. Rav Yehuda, Rabbi Meir, we can ascribe this opinion to Rabbi Meir, that anything that's mechuber, that's attached, is considered one for tumah. The Tanan Beisapach, this is the following a source where we want to prove that Rabbi Meir is the author of this halacha. The Tanan Beisapach, this is an earthenware vessel, a small earthenware vessel where you put oil in it for the oil to melt. Ubeisa Tavlin. This is a small earthenware vessel to keep spices in. Beis haner, same thing, you put a little candle in it. Shibakira, and all these things are attached to the oven, and they're connected. They're sealed and attached to the oven. Mitamin b'maga, ve'ein mitamin ba'avir. If the kira becomes tamei b'maga, by its contact with something that's tamei, so then these things, these earthenware, extensions of the oven will also become tamei. However, if the oven becomes tamei ba'avir, a special halacha for ovens, so if something tamei is hanging in the airspace of the oven, so the oven becomes tamei, so these extensions of the oven, these earthenware extensions, to hold your candle or your oil or whatever, your spices, they don't become tamei. Rabbi Meir, that's Rabbi Meir's opinion.
Just a quick question. Didn't we learn a few days ago that the wheels of a wagon don't count? They're attached to make the wagon a vessel.
The cemetery.
No.
What was the cemetery you're talking about here?
Right.
But they have to be over. They have to be over.
The wheels were attached. It didn't count. That's sort of opposite of this, right?
Was that in the context of where something would touch the wagon, so then the wheels would become tummy, or if something
No, the
touches
wagon was too big, the barrier between the tummy.
The wagon was sealed,
right.
and the wheels were attached.
The wheels didn't.
And if something like a tumah touches the wheel, it's not going to go into the...
Right, something like that.
The box was riding on top of the wheels, and it was the area above the box that the wheels projected.
Whether it was protecting the stuff that was projecting above the box or not.
I don't know.
It doesn't because...
It's a good point. I don't know. Either way, so in this case, the oven, we're making some kind of distinction between where the oven becomes tamei ba'avir in its airspace or with actual contact. Rabbi Meir says that's the situation. This is from Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Shimon mitaher. Rabbi Shimon says either way, the tumah that goes to the oven is not going to continue on to these attachments. Beishlam Rabbi Shimon, it makes sense. It's good according to Rabbi Shimon. Kesavar lav kekiradamu. He's consistent. He says these attachments are not considered part of the kira, of the oven. El Rabbi Meir, but according to Rabbi Meir, make up your mind. Ikekiradamu, if they're considered like part of the oven, afilu ba'avir namili tamu. Then even if the kira becomes tame in its airspace, then these attachments should also become tame. V'ilav kekiradamu, and if it's not, and then even with contact, it shouldn't affect the attachments. So you have to be consistent. So he said, really, Rabbi Meir, he agrees with Rabbi Shimon that minatayra, that these attachments are not considered part of the oven. For Rabbanan who degazer behu, but the Chachamim, the Rabbanan made a gzeira that if tumah touches the oven, it should go on to these attachments. So the Gemara says, okay, it's now... Well, first of all, we haven't found the source of the one who holds that mechuber chibur l'tumah, because both Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Shimon agree that there's really no chibur l'tumah. But even if you're going to say that he holds it's only derabanan, why is it not consistent even in the derabanan aspect? If the Chachamim made a gzeira, afilu ba'avir nami l'tamah. So why didn't they make a gzeira that even if the oven becomes tameh in its airspace, so the attachment should become tameh? So the Gemara says, Avdebahu Rabbanan Akera, the Rabbanan made a heker, they made a noticeable distinction, Kihechi Delay Asi Lemisr Falei Truma Vakachim. So that way you shouldn't come to burn Truma and Kachim if something becomes tameh, if Truma becomes tameh. Because let's say Truma came in contact with the attachment which was attached to the oven, since that's only the Rabbanan, you're not allowed to burn it. You're not able to burn it. So they the Chum had to leave their signature on this Isser of theirs. And the way that they leave their signature on it is by making an arbitrary distinction where sometimes it applies and sometimes it doesn't. We go on. Tan Rabbanan, Maspeiris shel prakim. So you have scissors made out of two pieces. The Ismail shel rihitini. This is a kind of wood tool which you use to smooth out wood. And there's a piece of metal embedded in the wood. What? A plane. Okay. Chibur l'tumah. In both of these cases, there's a chibur l'tumah. So the two pieces of the scissors and the metal attached to the wood on the plane, it's considered all one. So if one part of it is touched, then the other part is also tameh. Ve'in chibur lahazah. But they're not considered attached for hazah when it comes to purifying them by sprinkling on them. You can't sprinkle on one and then that'll work for the other. So manav shach, make up your mind. If it's considered one, then it should be even lakula, even lahazah, for sprinkling. V'i lav chibur, if it's not considered attached, afilu tumah namile. It's even for tumah. Amarava dvar taira mina taira, really b'shas malacha chibur bein l'tumah bein lazav shlo b'shas malacha eina chibur lo l'tumah lazav. Really mina taira if it's attached for its purpose at the time of the malacha, for its use, the reason why you need it to be attached. So while you're actually fixing up wood with the plane, or while you're actually cutting a guy's hair, so in those situations it's considered attached. For everything, for Tumah, for Azah, The Gazra Banan, but the Chum made a Gzeira, Al Tuma Shlo B'Shas Malacham, Mishum Tumah B'Shas Malacham. In the case of Tumah, so even though Shlo B'Shas Malacham, when you're not using the scissors, they're not considered attached. But the Chachamim said we're going to consider them attached because of a situation when you are cutting someone's hair. So just in case you get mixed up. Val Hazah B'Shas Malacha, and the Chacham made a Gzeira on Hazah while you're using the scissors. So really while you're using the scissors, the Hazah should work. You sprinkle on one of the metal pieces, then the other metal piece should automatically become tahor. But they were afraid, Mishum Hazah Shlo B'Shas Malacha, because of the time when you're not using the scissors. So therefore they just kept it plain and simple, that when it comes to Hazah, you got to sprinkle on both of the pieces of metal.